At this time, I'd like to welcome back Jeff Baumgartner. Jeff is the technology editor for Multichannel News to lead this next discussion on transforming TV. Please welcome Jeff and his panelists.
Testing, okay. And does this work? That one's for you. All right. Okay, thanks for that introduction, Lewis. Again, I'm Jeff Baumgartner with Multichannel News and Next TV, and excited to be the moderator for our next panel, which we've titled Transforming TV, which is a topic that spans a lot of areas, including interactivity, advanced and programmatic advertising, and of course, over-the-top video. And I think that gives us a lot of ground to cover, and I also think we have a great panel to get to all that. So I'm going to do some quick introductions from my left. We have Ben Huang, the Vice President of Marketing at Ericsson TV Platforms, and then next to him we have Eric Mathewson, the founder and CEO of WideOrbit, and then we have Bryon Schafer, Vice President, Measurement and Insight at Otter Media. And on the end, we have Jeff Snow, head of video distributor partnerships at Google. So as for the format, we're going to be doing this pretty much straight Q&A. We're going to leave some time, allow you to answer ask some questions to the panel. So just be thinking about those. But before we dive in, kind of like my panel earlier today, we're going to start off by going around the horn here and ask everybody to the panel just to expand a little bit on your role at your respective companies and to provide a little bit more detail on how your company kind of fits in. So, Ben, let's start with you and we'll move down.
So I run marketing for what we call the TV platforms business within Ericsson. And so as far as the TV space is concerned, Ericsson is really investing at the technology layer across the entire value chain. So that means everything from how you treat the media coming in, what's happening with UHD and 4K and HDR, all the way to how that content is delivered over different types of networks, different things like media playout, media management, and as well as TV platforms, how those experiences come together across all different types of devices. And so from our perspective, we do that on a pretty global basis. We run TV type services across that stack, in different parts of that stack, in about 80 different countries.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Eric Mathewson, founder and CEO of WideOrbit. We're a software company that runs the backbone of large media companies. So our software runs clients like NBC, CBS, Fox, ABC. We're processing about $30 billion in ad spend in our backbone systems. It's about 75% of TV stations in the U.S., about a third of cable nets, about a third of radio stations rely on our systems to schedule ads, profit maximize the placement of those ads, do all the accounts receivable billing. The goal of the company since inception was to surface that inventory across all of our clients so that a buyer could buy more efficiently that inventory, lowering the cost for both buyer and seller.
So I work for Otter Media, which is a holding group primarily of two holdings, Fullscreen and Elation. And Otter is a venture between the Chernin Group and AT&T to seed, invest, and acquire in the over-the-top video space, online video, and SVOD. I'm a shared service between the primary holdings where I work in sort of three major functions. One, primary research in support of consumer services development, marketing and media research in support of audience measurement, a lot of modeling work in support of investment decisions for marketing, and data management and laying out the infrastructure for consumer services with regards to making sure we have our operational measurement buttoned up.
And I'm with Google. We do a few different things in the TV space. I'm particularly with DoubleClick on the partnerships team, where I head up our partnerships with video distributors, which means for us, MVPDs, connected TVs, OTT devices. I work with them in a few different capacities, primarily with the DoubleClick ad serving platform, which works across display, as most people know it, but also video, and that's VOD, OTT, and also the monetization front. So the DoubleClick ad exchange, which is a programmatic selling platform, as well as Google AdSense.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So we have a pretty diverse group here representing different pieces of the kind of the TV and video ecosystem. And, as our panel, we're talking about transforming TV, which again spans, a bunch of different areas. And we have a lot of them covered here. But, from your point of view then, how is the TV world kind of transforming the most? And what are you kind of doing to address some of the fundamental shifts that are happening in the market? I'm sure we're going to have some different answers, but Ben, you can start, or anybody can jump in.
Yeah, so why don't I start? So when I looked at the agenda at the show, there's a ton of stuff, and even the prior equity analyst, that was a ton of stuff that's going on around content, a ton of things going on around business models as it relates to TV and media. For us, we track that pretty closely, but we innovate at the technology layer. And so when we look at the fundamental shifts that are happening in the technology layer as it relates to TV and media, in my mind, that kind of is bucketed into three things. One is around, there's a shift from kind of the hardware and software traditional model to more of like a software and cloud type model. There's more of a dynamic of web or web speed coming in, detailed instrumentation, things around like agility and flexibility and speed is a primary thing as it relates to these TV services. And then the last is a fundamental change around the experience, what it means to be a TV and video experience, and specifically in our minds, what it means to be a primary TV and video experience. Everything from multi-screen from the get-go to things around personalization, things of that nature. And so, when we think about that and those trends, for us, it's really around how do you develop platforms that major TV video service providers at scale can launch, where they can take advantage of these trends, where they can take advantage of this speed and agility. So if you kind of think about traditional what happens in a large-scale TV service today, it's very much a serial process. Things take a year plus to get out. There's not a lot of innovation, and so the joke that we hear, we sit in a lot of living rooms around the world, and we talk to people, and they say, life's great. I have all this new innovation that's going on. Love my iPad, love my mobile phone, and then when I sit down in front of my TV, I feel like I went back 5 years in time. And so, how do you take those experiences and bolster it with the platform on the back end? For us, it's a platform called Media First that we're really using to bring characteristics of what you would envision as like a global web service type of platform, specifically as it specifically applied to TV type services.
And how about for you, Eric? I think of you guys as traditional TV, but you're in digital. I mean, how are you kind of moving into multi-screen? As part of this whole transformation.
I think there's actually a tremendous amount of innovation, as Ben was talking about, across the TV landscape. There's not a lot of adoption of most of that innovation. It's very slow moving from a standpoint of getting that innovation adopted. We typically manage 93 to 97% of our clients' revenue, which again is typical linear TV. This is TV that's being watched or radio being listened to by people that wake up in the morning, they turn on their TV set, they go to work, turn off the TV set. Maybe when they leave, they come back, they turn the TV on again, and this TV set's on until they go to sleep. And that's most of America. I realize it's not your behavior, probably, but that is how most of America operates. So we're trying very hard to make sure that we can help our clients manage this substantial transition. We call it the $1 trillion transition, because the equity market caps of large media companies in the U.S. are about $1 trillion, translating that from traditional linear delivery to what is obviously the future, which is an IP-based, consumption-based delivery of video and audio.
Yeah, and then for Bryon, when I think of Otter Media, I think of over the top. I think digital first. So is that as far as like TV goes, where the focus is going to be, or are you guys looking at also how to kind of connect to the the big screen, the TV?
It is digital, so through the internet connecting to the big TV for certain. I think the impetus for the venture was born about serving millennials and post-millennial audiences and sort of where they're going and where they want to go and where that demand is, and being set to take advantage of the growth of that space, what is, arguably an overserved audience and highly fractionalized.
And then Jeff, kind of with you guys too, I think of DoubleClick, I think of the web, I think of over the top. But I mean, are you having a lot of conversations with MVPDs as well? I mean, how's that discussion kind of evolving?
Yeah, so essentially what happened was last year we acquired a company by the name of mDialog, which does dynamic ad insertion. And we've been increasingly working with the MVPDs who are moving towards a dynamically inserted, addressable world. And so we work with them on the IP front, with their apps, TV everywhere, but then increasingly as they move into VOD DAI and looking at linear DAI, we're accompanying that switch and supporting them as well.
Yeah, and what's the appetite been like? I mean, is there a huge gap there right now, or kind of what's the
Yeah, it's a pretty substantial gap. I mean, I think that's fair to say, and it's one for us coming from a digital background. I think we are very well positioned to help those companies understand how to transact programmatically, what programmatic might mean for their businesses going forward. But beyond that, really what we're focused on at this stage is helping to facilitate the direct sales and deliver that as directly sold advertisements into these different platforms.
All right, and when we're talking, go ahead.
Just saying, it's also interesting to watch Google run a lot of TV spots pushing Google TV Chrome device.
Right.
Fish where the fish are, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, now you mentioned something about what is with what you do, Jeff, relate to the devices like Chromecast, like Android TV.
Sure. So, in my role, we head up partnerships, which means two things. One is working specifically on the DoubleClick side of things, which I mentioned earlier, but then also having somewhat of a broader purview, helping to coordinate across different touch points at Google and acting as somewhat of a ambassador for our largest, most strategic partners to help make sure that we're presenting a unified picture for them across all of these different, what could be perceived as silos.
Yeah, and I did want to talk a little bit about the silos and how they seem to be kind of breaking down. It's not no longer, here's TV, here's PC, here's mobile. There's kind of a convergence happening. Now, how far along are we, with that convergence? Ben, we can start with you because, Ericsson bought Media Room a couple years ago, I think. And I mean, that started off as a TV-only platform, right? And then it kind of went to mobile. Now you got media first. So how are those platforms kind of, those silos starting to come together, I guess?
Yeah, I think for us, when there's kind of two very different views of what's happening in the marketplace right now. For the ones that are the kind of over-the-top, internet-born, internet-native type of entities, the silos, I mean, from the get-go, the silos weren't really there, right? You have Netflix, you have Hulu, you just expected to be able to access it from a lot of different devices. That isn't the case with how kind of the traditional TV complex works today. And so what we're seeing is because the consumers are so used to that type of consumer experience, you're starting to see those silos kind of from a kludge together perspective being broken down from the experience side. So as a consumer, you see that content, you can see how, doing something on your TV, you can kind of pick it up from your DVR or from your tablet and things like that. But what we know is on the back end, the technology is still a mess. I mean, just to give you some specific statistics, you'll be, for any of the major pay TV providers in the US today, they're running no less than 4 to 7 platforms, specifically just to do video for tablet, web, phone, and kind of what your traditional TV is.
All right. Now, Eric, how about for you? How are you kind of extending the bridge, there? I mean, is it like an ongoing integration process? I mean, how far along are you, to the, for the ability to kind of hit everything at once, I guess?
Well, to Ben's point, you typically have 6, 7, 8 entities in a technology stack at a large video content entity, whether it be a cable net or a station or whatever the case may be. Again, 6, 8, 10 entities of point solutions that they stack together to get video to an IP address. Those exact same functions are fully integrated on the linear side. We handle all of them. So we're working very hard with our clients, and we bought some technologies, bought several companies. We've been integrating around those technologies to provide a full stack to our clients, both on the linear and the digital side, because every video entity out there needs a single advertiser record, single agency record across all their media properties, because they want to make sure that they're monetizing their content at the same price in linear, digital, and emerging programmatic, where they have to come up with a price very, very quickly versus the traditional manually negotiated method.
And I know a lot of the discussion has kind of been on millennials, kind of changing the business to suit millennials. And Laura Martin talked earlier. She's like, I'm sick of talking about these millennials. And I think we all are to a degree, but it's still a segment that is kind of driving the shift. Now, I don't think any of us are in the millennial group. At least I know I'm not. But just to maybe get a sense of how the market is shifting, even outside the millennial realm. Maybe just go down the line. I mean, how have, even personally, how have you kind of changed your own viewing habits? From the old days of the set top on the TV, but even how are things changed for each of you? Anybody?
Yeah, I'm a Chromecast / Roku viewer primarily, so I still have a Blu-ray player that's gathering dust. But yeah, it's really a lot of Netflix and Amazon Prime these days. I'm watching fewer and fewer commercials. I watch live sports, and that's where I get the majority of my commercials. Beyond that, it's a lot of mobile and desktop. So I think, I am what you would consider a true kind of cross-screen viewer. I pick up different pieces of content here and there throughout the day. It tends to be short form on the go. And then when I'm sitting down, big screen, I'm using a lot of SVOD services.
Similarly, for us, we spend a lot of time on Netflix and Amazon through the best available screen, the largest set in the household. We talk about the TV as being sort of the hearth of the home, but we're probably as inattentive as we've ever been when it comes to watching on that screen, because we're multitasking on other devices and taking care of other things while watching. So we joke that it actually takes us longer to watch now because we've got to go back and rewind and rewatch a lot of things that we sort of glaze over. And I get most of my ad exposure probably in my car commuting in Los Angeles every day through satellite radio.
But you are?
Yeah, I'm serious as a client of ours. So you're getting those ads through us.
Thank you so much.
I really think it's important to sample all these different technologies. So I kind of have them all installed. So Apple, Netflix, Comcast Xfinity, DirecTV. I don't know, what have I missed? TiVo, Amazon. I actually
You have all this in your house?
I have all stacked up, and it's on a single remote, and we can bounce between them, frankly, very easily. It's not hard to do so. I realize that's not what anyone should do. It's kind of more of a lab experience for me.
Okay. So you have Eric's big lab. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a history museum of like all these different things. I mean, every year there's different things that are coming out. I mean, it got so bad to the point where my wife just took some and sold them on eBay. I didn't even know, So, but the thing is I think from an experience perspective, I find I'm working a lot harder, right? I'm a lot more kind of ADD because there's so many different things to watch, and I don't like it. I'll just go to something else. Or watch some other show. I'll tee up a few minutes of something, don't like it, go to something else, and I work a lot harder at it. Right now, I know you do this because we're kind of engaged in this industry, but that's not how most people prefer to sit down in front of the TV and be entertained.
So then, how much of your viewing is done through the old school way of just through a set-top box now? I mean, if you had to do a percentage, is it 20%? I mean, what's kind of the current state of things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Ben's house?
100% OTT. I mean, like in my house, I don't have any of the traditional pay TV services.
Are you a cord cutter then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, used to subscribe. Now I don't.
Okay. All right. How about you, Eric? How much of traditional TV
Cord
versus
maximizer? Again, I have Comcast. I have DirecTV. I have a
you're on the other end of the
$600-700 a
spectrum.
month bill on that side.
All right, now how about the rest of you guys? How much traditional TV do you watch if you had to put a percentage on it right now? You know, the old way, through the set-top, through a pay TV provider.
About 25%, we have direct TV. Everything in playback, though. Sometimes I'll put on local news to avoid annoying my wife, but that's really, we don't watch anything live.
And for me, it goes back to the sports. I'm a huge Warriors fan and Niners fan, so when they're on, I'm watching. Otherwise, I'm on my OTT device.
The Niners fans disappeared.
Well, you know what? Some of us are diehard. I've been a Warriors fan for a long time, and it's finally coming to fruition. So
It all balances out.
I think it'd be interesting too, though, even though we watch it all these different ways, like of the content you actually do watch, like how much of it is not what you would deem as like traditional linear, available through traditional linear means. And I think for me, a large portion of it is still through that, or the content that's kind of originally found there.
Okay. Yep.
As speaking of someone that's watching a bunch of both OTT devices as well as DVRs and regular, what shocks me is how poor the ad content is in so many of the OTT devices and feeds. The ad blocks are horrible. The ads repeat. The layout's bad. There's so much room for improvement. Obviously, people would prefer not to watch an ad. That's to be expected. But if you're watching the same ad 6, 8, 10 times in a 22-minute program, it's obviously super painful and fixable.
I think that's also part of the larger challenge with advertising over the years. We were talking about it at our topic roundtable, that visual inattention to ads and inattention to ads has largely been solved for by frequency for the last 50 years. And getting towards that quality of exposure is really important, and the industry is obviously really ripe for improvement in that area.
my sense with that is that there's sort of a disconnect because you have these digital buyers who are used to transacting, using DSPs and using exchanges and things like that on an impression by impression basis. And then you've got television and premium content, which is transacted using a different measurement standard. And then you've got this middle ground, which is where OTT is right now and a lot of VOD is. And it seems like it's suffering, and that inventory is undervalued because it sort of sits in this no man's land of measurement.
Right. And what can be done about the ad loads? I'm thinking of VOD and TV everywhere, right? Just personal example, the new season of Fargo on FX, right? I saw the first season, loved it. It's like, oh, I didn't realize this was on, so I figured I'd watch it on TV Everywhere app, and the ad loads are really painful, to go through. It's to the point while the ad's running, I'll be checking my email while I'm waiting because you can't fast forward through it. So, what's kind of going to be the answer to that? Part of this whole transforming of TV. Maybe is it lighter ad loads? Do they become more valuable versus these gigantic ad loads that a lot of people won't tolerate?
I think it's not just quantity of the ads that's a problem. It's the recency of them. How many of you are seeing, again, back to back to back. Same thing on the promotional side. I'm a fan of some of these discovery programs that are very good for relaxing your brain, like the gold shows where they wash dirt, and then they wash more dirt, and then they promo another gold show that's washing more dirt. But by the time you finish watching the program, there's so many promos for other discovery programs. At first you might think that program's interesting, and by the end of that half-hour program, you've seen so many promos for it, you don't even want to see it. Mm-hmm. That's literally just quality of the systems. They need to do a whole lot better job at optimizing those systems.
All right. Now, for Bryon, now with Otter Media, what is kind of the breakdown then of your services? Is it mostly subscription? Do you do a lot of ads? What's kind of the mix, with some of the services that you're doing?
So with regards to the advertising business, it's largely trying to get out of that 30-15 interruption-based model that the traditional television business has been in. And your experiences, I think, underscores the fact that FX was in serving all those ads in the context you were watching online, was trying to have that roll up into its rating. So they're trapped in this ratings ecosystem, which is tough for the consumer because they want that to count as part of their audience, how they measured it traditionally. And your experience is leveraging what audiences there are to drive more tune-in, a little bit different, but are both similar in the model. So a lot of the things that Fullscreen is focused on is content marketing, influencer marketing, sort of the next generation of branded entertainment, and leveraging sort of new models to help marketers message in new ways, and just sort of rip up the in the box pre-roll 30-second spot interruption-based mindset.
And then Jeff, from Google's standpoint, what are you guys doing to kind of help with this situation? As you're talking to programmers at MVPDs, what are they kind of asking for, or at the same time, what kind of solutions are you able to present them to kind of deal with this?
Sure. So we have been working with the programmers for way back, right? So on display advertising, before there was even the bandwidth to start streaming video, and then as video became more prevalent online, we served ads into that video, right? But about 3 or 4 years ago, we came to the realization that we needed to rebuild our ad stack for video to have sort of a complete, robust solution video first, as opposed to looking at it as sort of more of a feature of the DoubleClick stack. So we went through about a 3-year exercise. I mentioned mDialog, and my team was formed about a year ago specifically to start speaking to the MVPDs and OTT players when we felt like we had a robust enough offering. I think where we're taking it is dynamic ad insertion sold on an impression by impression basis is inherently going to be a better experience, because instead of doing broadcast, you're looking at more of a unicast delivering relevant messages that are audience targeted, right? So the belief is that as the advertising relevance improves and the quality improves, that's going to improve the experience for both the advertiser as well as the MVPD, as well as the programmer and the viewer.
I think if you look at what those consumers want, they want a reasonable ad load or a reasonable exchange for a fair value of their time for what they're watching, and relevance, and even just choice in the matter, where they typically haven't had that.
Okay, and then Ben, for Ericsson with Media First and Media Room, where does this all kind of fit into your thinking? Because you're kind of providing a platform. Are you there just to kind of support whatever models they want, or are you guys out there proposing ideas? I wasn't sure how deep into the advertising fold you guys are going.
Yeah, as it relates to advertising, I think for us, we're kind of doing this hand-in-hand with a lot of the operators. What you're starting to see is there's a different rate of progress and different levels or different appetite for experimentation depending on which country you're in and which region you're in. And so what we found is there's been a lot more experimentation that we're seeing in some parts of Europe and some parts of Asia. Less so here. I mean, obviously, or not obviously, a lot of the experimentation that's happening here, a lot of it is being done with more of the digital platforms first as it relates to advertising. So there's that. And then so when we think about building, how we need to approach this problem from a platform perspective, really think about it in terms of what are the key scenarios that we're going to want to enable these operators to be able to do. And traditionally today, most of the stuff outside of the standard ad type model, a lot of the things that's being talked about is more like dynamic ad insertion, localized dynamic ad insertion, things of that nature.
All right, yeah, and let's we're going to stick a little bit on advanced advertising, and we've talked a little bit about programmatic. I know it's kind of been a term. It's definitely a buzzword. There's some debate still maybe on how to define it. But for each of you, how are these kind of digital style models, bridging over to the realm of traditional TV? Eric, you guys have been right in the middle of that. You guys kind of come from the TV to the programmatic model. So what's been happening there?
Yeah, it's really early days. Certainly, people are talking a lot about linear programmatic. My guess it's about $100-200 million a year industry today. The vast majority of the entities that are doing linear programmatic today have taken call it an old school unwired model, or a kind of a rev share type model with a local MSO or a network, and they are largely doing programmatic on a manual basis, which of course is kind of in contrast to the whole process or the whole definition of programmatic being automated. But I do think it's making great strides as kind of where we're going to go. WideOrbit's investing a lot of money in this area. We're starting to see some real change with advertisers buying directly on our platform in a truly automated way. Next year, I think it'll be a couple of points of the industry, maybe 2-3%. Again, for perspective, it's a $60 to $70 billion U.S. industry. 3% is 2-point-something billion. So can we go from a couple $100 million to $2 billion next year? I think it's absolutely plausible.
And then, Jeff, with programmatic for you guys, is it, are you fully programmatic? How automated is it at this point?
Yeah, so, we want to accommodate our partners in whatever way they want to sell. And primarily when they're selling premium content, they want to sell that directly. So if you think about where programmatic started 6 to 8 years ago, right, it has this association as being RTB, open auction, kind of remnant web display inventory, which is sort of a negative connotation. And I think in the last few years, we've seen a major migration upstream in terms of doing premium deals, one-to-one, one buyer, one seller, fixed price. And really that comes down to using audience data to make that more effective, and then the automation. And so those are the pieces that I see sort of the best of programmatic that are being translated over to TV. And we're accompanying that, right? So what we want to do is just accommodate the partners. If they want to sell in that way, we can do any type of transaction that they would like to conduct through the ad exchange.
Now, is it, you'd mentioned, sometimes programmatic gets attached to the idea of remnant. So what is the current scenario then? Is it, still mostly, remnant inventory, or kind of what's the,
I think
current
I think it
trajectory?
depends on what the inventory source is. So there's definitely a lot of long tail online video inventory out there of questionable quality that I guess you could consider remnant, that's probably transacted programmatically. Where our focus really is on the premium content, and because of that, it's much less. In fact, RTB doesn't really even factor into it most of the time. It's really a preferred deal, or what we call a programmatic guaranteed, where you're actually booking a deal directly into an ad server from a DSP. And so you're just using the pipes to deliver the deal. You're not doing an RTB type situation.
Okay. And then for Bryon, I guess on the ad side, is it entirely programmatic, or how do you guys put yours together?
I think more buyers in the market are great, and if someone wants to buy programmatically, being able to service them and making it easy for people to buy is great. It's another pond for you to fish in for revenue. It is an exhaust valve on surplus inventory, and at the end of the day, that puts more pressure on your inventory, which is good, right? So I think it's really important in areas, especially areas where there is a lot of inventory, and again, just making it easy for people to buy is really important. Sometimes that means retrofitting technology to make it look and feel old school, like buying GRPs in television. Someone wants to buy tonnage, come in, take a chunk of your inventory, great. If you have some left over, or you want to move someone against, someone that wants to buy that way, I think that's great too.
And then we have seen some programmatic models get into like big tentpole events. Like Eric, you and I talked, I don't know if it was this time last year, but pretty close, around the Super Bowl, right? So you guys sold some ads in the Super Bowl. I think it was on a local level. Kind of run through, kind of catch us up on what you did there, what the results were, and we can talk a little bit about what you're looking at for the big game of next year.
Sure. Last year, we ran a series of spots in the Super Bowl in local television. So, of course, Super Bowl spots right now are probably trading with $4.5 million for a 30-second spot, something like that. Last year was slightly less, but again, that's at the network level. So the local stations have the ability to insert a couple of spots. It's about, over the course of the Super Bowl, I think it's about 15 spots during the game, and another half dozen before and after, depending upon how you're measuring the kind of before and after commentaries surrounding the Super Bowl. And we found some clients that had some open inventory. We were able to connect that with Mondelez, which is the owner of Nabisco, and so we ran a series of spots in some local markets. And again, it was an early test of true programmatic. This year, we'll be running more spots, but frankly, last year was kind of on a batch basis, and now we're operating our programmatic exchange, a programmatic system on a daily basis, and so the volume should increase very substantially.
Now, would you define that as like what happened last year was kind of a watershed moment, or was it still small enough it wasn't even, you couldn't define it that much yet?
It was the first, they were the first programmatic spots ever sold in the Super Bowl, and obviously there's a lot of marketing benefit to that, and Mondelez got a lot of value out of it, and showing that they were trying to innovate in using programmatic, and going forward, of course, you want to innovate, but of course you would much prefer to be the kind of fat part of the pipe that is a constant event. Well, we're getting there. Volumes in programmatic are increasing, frankly, every week.
Now, Ben, I'm not going to ask you about programmatic because I know you guys don't have a programmatic ad system unless I miss something. But you guys do have two different platforms, right? You got Media Room, which is, I guess, I don't know if legacy is the right way to talk about it, but then you have Media First. So walk us through some of the the key differences between them and which markets you're really going to target with each of those products kind of moving forward, because we still see Media Room kind of bubble up on some telcos, for example.
Yeah, so if I kind of take that question, I kind of relate it back to this transforming TV topic. I think what you're starting to see right now is almost every type of TV video service provider is realizing there's some type of change. But in terms of what they're actually doing against that change, that is what is differing, right? And so what we've seen from a wholesale perspective, there have been very few operators at scale, whether it's a traditional MVPD or more of like a OTT type of entity, but ones who have like major scale, really kind of innovating, really pushing the envelope. I would say it's more the exception than the rule right now. And so when we think about this transformation that's happening, we know that everybody kind of acknowledges that it will be happening, but it's really more of a question of timing. And so for some of these entities, some of these major TV service providers, some of them look at it in terms of, look at their world still as like, I'm a telco TV guy, I'm a cable guy, I'm a satellite guy, and that's where my competition is today, and we have a platform for them if that's what they want to do. And then some are looking at, okay, let's think about where the puck is going. You look at OTT services that have gotten major scale, and I would say none of us should think that that's the end state of where TV will be. Right? I mean, there's still a lot of deficiencies in those types of experiences, in those types of models and the technologies that power that. And so when you think about where the puck is going, for us, it's really around how do you think about these TV services almost being run as akin to the types of characteristics you see in global web services like what Amazon does or what Facebook does. The scale, the flexibility, the agility, and they test the A/B, they do the A/B testing the heck out of it and things like that. That's where we think TV experiences will go. That's where we think next-gen TV experiences will go and next-gen TV platforms will go, and we have a bet there as well.
And where are you getting the most traction these days? I mean, is it from the traditional MVPDs, IPTV providers, or is it coming from over the top? Because it seems like a day doesn't go by, you don't have some sort of niche service, standalone service launching. So even like a virtual MVPD. So where's the attraction coming from?
I think there's a bit of an inflection point. I think it's actually a pretty interesting point in time right now because there's been a ton of experimentation that's been happening around over the top type of services. I would say monetization hasn't been a very high metric on the list right now, but we're starting to see more and more that metric rising.
You mean ad monetization?
Ad monetization, subscription monetization. I think like everybody was just kind of more of in a eyeballs type game, and you can tell in terms of how much they've invested into that type of service, how much money they've put into content, into the technologies. I would say all that's been pretty minimal at this point in time. And you can see why that is. I mean, you look at the people who are running these web services at scale, the OTT services, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, low hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And so it's not for the faint of heart right now. And so when we think about the point in the industry that it's at right now, is I think there's more of a shift of focus on how do you really drive core businesses, how do you drive sustainable businesses out of this? And so when we see the traction that we're getting, it's folks that are realizing, okay, I need to make some bets in this area. I need to think about how I balance the risk and the bets I have so that I don't cannibalize and throw, I don't accelerate the rate at which the traditional business is going down, but how do I make my bets in a very kind of smart way? And sometimes that'll be forward-looking MVPDs, and sometimes that'll be kind of these OTT guys who are trying to play at major scale.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think traditional TV players aren't quite yet feeling the pain to really throw in aggressively. I mean, even just looking at some of the businesses, cable VOD, for example, it's been around 12, 13, 15 years, and still a lot of room for improvement with regards to consumer experience.
Yeah, and I think, so for us, as I said, we launched about a year ago, at least my team did. And since then, we've been fortunate to compete for some pretty big RFPs in Tier 1 and across both OTT and MVPD. And so far, we've won everything we've competed for. And I think the common element there is really people who are embracing the future. And so a lot of it is cultural. And so you have certain MVPDs that are kind of digging in their heels, and there are people that are more threatened by some of the things coming down the pipe, and there are others who see the opportunity and embrace it. And
Now, are you able to talk about some of those wins, or how public are you guys been able to be about that?
I mean, I can tell you that they span from very large OTT players, so to traditional Tier 1 MVPDs. No announcements to make now, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just checking. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. I have some other questions, but I want to give you guys a chance to ask our panel a question. So if you want, just raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you. Anybody? Oh.
Hi, everyone. So all day we've been, talking about, two distinct areas, traditional TV and OTT. But if you look at it from a consumer's perspective, it's their world of entertainment. And how we've been seeing the shift is it was primarily linear TV, and then there was a little bit of on-demand, catch up. The shift now has been approximately 60% of scripted content is being viewed on demand. And linear TV is being dominated by sports and certain amount of news. And every one of you is complaining about the quality of ad serving on OTT or reach devices, as I would call it. Is there any research that you're doing, considering that a reach device is a personal device and it's unicast, and a traditional TV experience is if an ad comes on, I can switch channels, I can browse through something else. Here I'm forced to sit through whatever the ad load, and right now most content providers are pushing that same 7 to 13 minute an hour ad load onto their reach devices. So is there any kind of research that you're doing in terms of both improving the efficacy of the ad load, and what kind of ad load should go on which device?
Anybody have any research they'd like to share on that?
I'm stuck on the 60% of scripted programs watched on VOD. I'm like, that's not true.
Time shift. I think you're including time shift.
It's on demand. So whether it's DVR'd, whether it's
way high.
that's some of the research that I've seen in the market.
Yeah, actually, that kind of points to one of the things. I think there's a surfeit of research in this market. In fact, some new report seems to come out every day, and a lot of them are contradictory. So, I know that we watch everything closely, and we certainly know what our partners are doing. But in terms of the research, there's certainly no shortage, as far as I can tell, in the marketplace about this transition.
Some of the research that I've done the past 10, 15 years on the relationship between the ad load and the ability for someone to recall that ad in the context of a 22 or 44-minute episode of a television show, or other predictive measures like their intent to use that service again. There's a linear relationship between that ad load and those measures. So I think TV has sort of done a really great job of managing itself right into the middle of like how many ads can we sell and how can we take advantage of those eyeballs. But at the same time, we know that the genie's out of the bottle when it comes to SVOD and having ad-free experiences and things like that. So I think we've seen research in the market just done, the consumers raised his hand with regards to that. Now, with regards to optimizing by platform, yeah, I think a lot of what's coming is the idea of personalization, if it's through making sure that they have the relevant ad and layering on the context of what device they have, where they are. We haven't even seen the beginning of like using geolocation data and things like that to make things more relevant and more effective.
And just to add on to that, do you foresee a shift in where a lot of the scripted content would even move more towards an SVOD environment and linear is dominated by sports and things like that?
Me personally, I think consumers will gravitate towards the better experience, and you want to watch sports live, you want to get your news on the best available screen at the moment that you're interested in catching news or there's breaking news. So I think that what programming hours exist in a linear world will be dominated by things that people want to be watching live.
Clearly, people are going to use VOD to do scripted programming more than kind of any other type of consumption. I guess the biggest shock is not whether or not they're going to use it or not. The biggest shock is that Replay TV and TiVo started in 96, 97, 98, and we're still at 50% DVR penetration. I mean, it's shocking that it's not substantially higher than that today, and that behaviors have really not changed as dramatically as, frankly, probably all the behaviors in this room. Again, your average American is simply not embracing in the same way that people that are following the innovation and technology.
Yeah, when you look at the technology adoption curve, price, ease of use, education, when you want to get to the back end of that curve, you got to put a big red Netflix button on a remote control, right? You got to market the Xbox platform as a family entertainment console, not a gaming console. So making it really easy, having that educational component. There's a huge proportion of the U.S. consumer base that classifies as a technology Luddite. So making sure that you make things easy and frictionless for them is really paramount to that.
Well, and obviously we've been talking a lot today about Netflix and its success, but at the same time, when Laura was up here, she was discussing Hulu and their premium service, which goes without ads, and the lack of adoption of that. So there's something interesting in that research that says people are willing to watch advertisements for a lower price, right? So there is still that opportunity. I think with Netflix, because there is no ad supported, we don't really have that basis for comparison, right?
I mean, there's a chunk of America that says, why on earth would I want to search for my content and put it on a schedule, be recorded automatically? Why would I want to do that? I mean, it's completely antithetical to our behavior, but there's people that are like, that just sounds like an awful lot of effort when I can just turn on the TV and watch.
Again, you're talking, some of the misrepresentation that's happened all morning is when people talk millennials, they talk, we're thinking teenagers. Millennials spans up to about 35, and people aren't pressing that red button or running home from a cocktail party to catch a show. They have the expectation that they will have the show available to them on demand, whether they've remembered to record it. There's still certain shows, because of rights primarily, which are not available on demand. For those, they have to record. But the expectation it'll be available to me when I want it, where I want it.
No doubt. We're going to IP-based delivery, period, exclamation point. There's no delusion about that.
Okay, we're getting the high sign. Those are great questions, so thank you very much. Now with that, we didn't get to the ad blocking question, so sorry, Laura, as I know we've neglected that. But with that, I do believe we're out of time on this panel, so please join me in thanking our panel for their insight today.